Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome you once again to the A Plus Drive Show here live on Pensbus Radio 96.1 FM. And we always, as you know, we bring to you live on Facebook at Christian Fiado and also on YouTube at Chris Iking. And excitingly, we've been coming to your doorsteps with amazing topics concerning we youths, and we know most of it has been productive to our youth development and our career path. So what we have here today, a wonderful man, a life coach, an executive performance coach, and he's going to help us today have a discussion on leadership. Right, with our other episodes previously, we spoke a bit about leadership, where we interacted with students of Harlem International School. We interacted with the school prefect as well, and they shared with us their exciting ideas about what leadership is all about. And we are in the month, of independence. That's the Ghana month, and it's more appropriate for us as you to get the basics of leadership, how leadership can proceed to build the nation, Ghana and Africa at large. So we are planning of having a good conversation today. So join me today as I welcome Mr. Christian Diaba. Good afternoon, Mr. Diaba.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nice meeting you once again.
It's great to be here.
We thank God. Please hope you're enjoying the Heritage Band.
Yes, I am. Actually, I've been looking at the list of productions that you've done so far this month, and it's great. And so thank you for the work you do in terms of service to the youth of this nation.
Thank you also for giving us this opportunity, and we are most grateful, my viewers and I, we are most grateful to have you here today. So to wrap up or to just move ahead with that discussion, I would first and foremost like to ask you about your experience in the former regime of leadership comparing to our current leadership. After this conversation, I would then move forward ahead and we speak a bit more into leadership proper. We want to gain I don't know what to say, but we want to gain the olden days form of leadership where we heard about Rawlings and some other predecessors. We would like you to give us a comparison for the leadership at the past and now.
Right, thank you very much. Interesting question. If I understand what you're asking, you want me to give you a sense of what leadership used to be in the past,
Yes.
Both in the general sense of it, and I get the sense you're talking possibly in the political sense as well.
Yes.
Well, I must say that I like to put this within a particular context, and that context is within the changing roles of leadership today. Remember that in the past, for a great part of the past, the picture that was painted of leaders was that picture of more of that superstar, that person that everybody looked up to, that person that people felt that was high up there. And so the sense of leadership at that time was, if you like, the star performer kind of person. It was often the case that people would get surprised and struggle with a leader who, as it were, had faults or failings. Fast forward to today, you're dealing with leadership, and the conversation about leadership is not so much the perfect person. It was a conversation that included thinking about leadership as a form of a function, but beyond that, words like authentic and more recently vulnerability became a great part of leadership. That is not something that previously you would expect to see. So that evolution is happening. Don't get me wrong, that is not to say that in the past the focus has only been on the leader as the star performer, because of course right from many centuries and millennia in the past, Jesus talks about servant leadership,
Yes.
where it was not the person who was the star performer, but the person who served as providing support and serving others. So it brings us to talking about, in that sense, we're using the word leadership. Leadership, what really do we mean? People define leadership in different forms, and some of the thoughts around leadership has been the one who creates in people the desire and the can-do spirit even when they don't feel they have it. People also look at leadership in terms of the person who makes or creates an environment for change. People simply would define leadership as one who has a following, and here I'm talking about a leader as one who has a following. And John C. Maxwell, for example, would tell you that if you call yourself a leader and you don't have a following, then in actual fact you're just taking a walk.
Oh, okay.
So leadership involves the aspect of creating a sense of doing things, creating a sense of change, more so making or creating a following. The aspects of leadership where we talk about leadership as a title or position, leadership as a function, there's even leadership as an attitude or a mindset. Now, coming to Ghana, when I started voting, it was just around the start of the Fourth Republic. So when the Fourth Republic started, I was in the university then, and so I got to vote in the Rawlings era, in the Kufuor era. So the two terms of Rawlings, 2 terms of Kufuor, and right up to today. Has leadership changed? In a sense, yes. In some other sense, no. The aspect of leadership as creating a following, having influence, driving change would remain. The persons in the role of leadership, of course, has changed. So in the broader sense, those are some of the things I can say. I'm sure there are some specifics that you want me to speak to.
I think you've basically treated the scope of leadership as you began with. But if you don't mind, if you get to give us some of the identities of a good leader, or who is supposed to be a leader, actually. I like the quote you made about John C. Maxwell, saying if you're a leader having a follower, you are either walking. So
Let me help you with
help
that.
me, sir.
If you think you're a leader
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have a following,
Okay.
you're just taking a walk.
Wow. If you think you're a leader and you don't have a follower,
Yeah.
you're just taking a walk.
Yeah, in almost paraphrase terms, that's what he says. And he makes it to the point that you can't call yourself a leader when there are not people who are following you. The idea of a leader actually is a mindset of having people follow you.
In this regard, can you help us with how we can pull people alongside with us to play good roles as leaders in achieving a particular goal, and how we can sustain them through that?
So what I'm hearing you talk about has to do with how does a leader create and sustain a following.
Yes, sir.
Remember that there's a reason why people will follow a leader. There's a reason why somebody will follow a leader. It possibly could do with their knowledge. It could be with their influence. It could be with their charisma, which in a sense is almost like influence. It could be with some power they have. It could be any of these. If you want to create a following, you have to ask yourself, why should people follow you? In talking about why people follow, it's because you're painting for them a vision that is strong enough for them to want to identify with that vision. So that's about creating a following. The other leg of your question has to do with sustaining a following. What you sell to people would also determine how long they keep being with you. If you sell sensations to them, if you sell sensationalism to them, you'd just like if any other drug, you'd have to keep upping the tempo on sensationalism to get them to follow you. Because the day you are not as sensational as they knew you to be, they almost lose a reason for following you. Now, another example, if you sell to them hope, the scenario where you give them a reason to aspire to something, then for as long as you're creating a sense that they are making progress on that aspiration, they find a reason to follow you. In doing that, be mindful that you should not, in attempting to sell hope, translate what you're selling them into your tool of manipulation.
Okay.
So it is important to help people as a leader think for themselves and make the choice to follow you.
I like the aspect where you mentioned the manipulation aspect of the manipulating aspect of leaders. Can you help us in knowing the positive ways a leader can lead his people? You know, for instance, like our fellow colleagues, sometimes we aspire for leadership roles in our universities and secondary schools. There are some notions we have in mind, as in the power we have and all of that. Can you help us have a positive mindset in not manipulating people for our self-interest?
Leadership is influence. Influence for good or for not so good. When it is influence for not so good, then you know that you are skirting around manipulation. Manipulation then is within the sense that you're getting them to do something you want them to do without them left on their own wanting to do it. So that, for example, will include selling them a lie, which gives them the sense that they'll follow you because of the lie you're selling them, but not because in their right thinking they want to follow you. So that's got to do with manipulation. The flip side, where we're using influence for good, has to do with recognizing that we all have our aspiration. If as a leader, you're creating the influence that helps people plug into the sense of hope towards their aspiration, if that aspiration is something that aligns with what you are aspiring for, if you are selfless in how you engage with them, you are influencing them for good. The best example of this kind of influencing for good is, and I don't need to go far, not that I met him in the physical, but that's what I can speak to more, and that's Jesus Christ. Where, for example, Jesus sells for us the hope of a better experience. And remember, that hope is not a hope that Diaba and that's all. It's a hope that offers us strength to make it through even the tough times of today and eternity. So that's an example you can talk about. If you look, for example, at some other leaders, many people today will remember not too long ago Barack Obama, when he sold Yes We Can to the American people. He was selling from different perspectives. It wasn't from that conversation a situation of him aspiring and saying that give me your vote, and then he gets into the role and that's it. But he was plugging into something very interesting. Here was a black African American who, at a time when it was unheard of for an African American to be president, was plugging into something that every human would connect with, or it will resonate with. The ability to do what ordinarily they could not do. The can-do spirit, and selling that awakened in people a reason to follow his leadership. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. That tells me that having a leadership role to play, it should fall in line. You should get to know the interest of your followers as well, and that's with your personal interest also coming together and forming or achieving a particular goal. That's my particular perspective from the little you've said. Do I make sense in that regard?
I will flip it the other way. It's not about finding the interest of people and trying to sell to them based on that interest. It's about being genuine in sharing, these are my aspirations. These are the things I hope for, and I hope for us. Be aware that if those aspirations resonate with people, those people will follow. But remember this, if your agenda is to reach people because you want them to follow you, therefore you try and say the things they want to hear, they may follow you. Remember, there was a very interesting question you asked earlier on. How do you create that following? How do you sustain the following? So they may follow you, but with time, you may not be able to sustain that following. When people begin to read into the feeling or the sense that you're not genuine, you're not authentic.
I'm so particular about youth leadership, young leadership. And when you go to our campuses, we have issues of SLC presidents and having some conspiracies around their leadership and all of that. Many of us are finding challenging that role in that sense. We feel maybe we are not in the outer skirt of, or we are not in a public view where everybody's looking at us. We are just in a confinement, doing whatever we want. Maybe perhaps we are blessed to be leaders, whereas others are not supposed to be leaders. Can you help us in how we can realign our mindset? So let's say if I'm to be an SLC president for a particular institution, how can I realign myself not to enrich my pocket or to fame my name or something on campus, but rather attaining or achieving a particular goal? I think this is one of the major issues disturbing the system in various campuses, if I might say.
There are about 2 or 3 comments I would like to make around that. It will be very unfortunate if the SRC leaders of today in whether specific ones or in generality, are aspiring and are taking up the role of SRC leadership in our schools for the purpose of enriching themselves. So that's the first comment I'll make. It will be very unfortunate, and the reason why it will be unfortunate is that, you know, it's always been said that the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. Actually, the youth are the leaders of today. More than 55% of Ghana's population are in the youth, right? What that means is that we are feeding ourselves at even that young level of position leadership with the wrong reasons for being in leadership. So that's the second comment I want to make there. The third one is more something for us to reflect on. As an SRC leader, why are you a leader? What at the end of your term do you want to be remembered for? Be mindful that what that role as an SRC leader offers you is an opportunity to build experience in a small space, in leading people, knowing that if I make a good impact and I create and leave behind a good legacy, I would walk away having built skills for myself for the future. Having answered the question with those three main comments, I want to even spread it a little further and say that I am also a little concerned, and I want to draw attention to the point that I don't need to be an SRC leader to be a leader. To put it another way, I don't need to always have a title to be a leader. Each one of us must be clear that we are leaders. For as long as even one person follows you, you're a leader. The impact you're going to have on that one person is so significant. And if that impact you are having on that one person is not something that's of value to you, then you need to ask yourself questions. To add to that, even remember that when I am a leader, the people that follow me and look up to me every time, even when I don't know they are looking up to me. And I think that should be a sobering thought to all of us, because what it means is that I must mind what I say, I must mind what I do, and I must mind how I do what I do.
Okay. Grateful for this amazing point about leadership and leadership on campus. Mr. Diaba shared a bit of some intriguing points, and I'd like to mention some of them to you, and I'm hoping you took some notes though. So leadership is not the perfect person. I really like that point. And the person who provides support and serving others is who a leader is. Then let me right straight ahead to our inspirations. He said we should be genuine in sharing our inspirations and aspirations to our followers. That's people who are looking up to us in achieving a particular goal. And leadership is influence for good, but it's not so good. So there are two sides of the coin for leadership. Mr. Diaba, thank you so much. We've been learning a lot. When we reflect to our personal lifestyles, our personal lives as youth, I wouldn't like to go much into your younger ages, your younger days. I would say your old now because you are still young. I know there are some people who find it more challenging without the leadership of their parents to make ends meet for themselves in life. Maybe perhaps they are out of school and they couldn't further themselves anywhere. How can they play roles as leaders in their personal life in achieving something meaningful for themselves?
Great. Let me say something about influence when you were sharing the inspiration before I answer the question. Mindful that this question is about self-leadership, right?
Yes, please.
I wanted to tweak one of the summaries and say that when I talked about influence, what I actually meant was that in terms of influence, you can influence people for good or for not so good. In other words, you can influence people for good or for bad. So influencing people for bad is manipulation. Right?
Yes.
So just to correct that.
So
Now you talked about the people who may not have the leadership of their parents. How do they deal with leading themselves?
Yes, sir.
And in that question, inherent is that in that question is the sense of, if I'm struggling to survive, who cares about leadership? So maybe in the street man's term, you say that it be leadership we go chop. But that's something that is really powerful. The aspect of self-leadership is very powerful. If you are struggling to survive today, it does not take away the importance of being able to lead yourself, understanding that leadership is for a bigger cause than today's meal. And if you understand that in that sense, then clearly what will happen is that you would be mindful about how you carry yourself, how you act, what you do, how you do it, what you say, the choices you make, right?
Yes.
In addition to building for yourself opportunities, not only for survival, but going beyond survival and thriving. You may be hungry today. Don't let that hunger cloud your judgment with regards to the choices you make. Rather, let that hunger push you to telling yourself that today I may be hungry, but tomorrow I will become somebody who is making a difference. So I'll be careful what my choices are today, so that yes, I'll work towards finding means of survival. But in doing that, I'm not going to allow myself to make choices that will in the end jeopardize what potentially I can be tomorrow.
Wow.
So self-leadership in that sense will require me being mindful about how I control myself, how I regulate myself in what I say, what I don't say, in what I do, what I don't do. I'm sure we all have heard stories of people who are making impact today. And whilst they're making impact and they're riding the waves and people are excited about them today, somebody pulls out something they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and brings it into the public domain. And all of a sudden it almost kinds of messes them up completely or paints them up in a bad light. Now, It's because possibly at that time they didn't consider that tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'll be that person. So they were not mindful about the choices they made or the actions they take.
Wow. This is so educative. You've made some point on self-leadership, and you made reference to we being hungry and feeling to satisfy our hunger at this point. But you made an interesting point by saying we might be hungry today, but we should remember that one day we will be someone, we will be somebody in the future. So we might be conscious of the decisions we make as at now. And this brings me to the point to also ask about picking up ideas and influences from other people, even as you're having your self-leadership, criteria in your life, other influences will fall in place. How can you manage that aspect of it? Just have an idea.
You can't be an island. None of us lives as an island outside of what any and everybody else sees or does. What that means is that we have the potential of people saying things to us, people doing things that we would see. But we've got to be able to, in terms of self-leadership, discern between what is right and what is wrong. And remember that what is right and what is wrong is not always going to be a choice between black and white.
Okay.
In fact, it may not always be a choice between right and wrong. Sometimes it's a choice between good and the better. And so, if you feel attracted to follow the influence of somebody, or you are tempted to act in a particular way because somebody else acts that way, ask yourself the question: when I look at where I am headed as a leader, will this reflect me in the right light? Number two, many years from now, would I look back on that act and feel proud that I did it? Or if I were, and I like to use this example for a lot of scenarios, if I were watching the news with my young children and the video recording of that thing I did is being played, how would I feel about it? Will it make me feel good? Will I be able to feel proud in front of my children who would be watching mom or dad do that? Those are some of the questions we should ask. As a Christian, and really that's what I am, that's my faith, and I can't but speak about that. As a Christian, I should be asking myself a question: would this honor Christ? Whatever it is I will do or say, or I will be influenced by somebody to do or say, would it honor Christ? Remember, I've moved from is it good or bad to is it something that brings honor to the name of Christ, that brings honor to the name you want to build for yourself as a leader. You know, people say, and I'll say this in conclusion, you cannot stop the birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from landing on your head. You cannot stop the influences around you or the people around you from doing what they choose to do. But you have the choice to follow them and do it, or be influenced by them to do what they do. That's a personal choice.
Yes.
And nobody takes that away from you.
Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me just share also what you said. Let me paraphrase you this time. So there's a choice always with good and better. There's a choice always with self-leadership, and that's either good and better. And you should ask yourself these questions. When you look at where you are headed in the future, ask yourself, will you regret it, or you'll be proud, or you feel proud of your future when you look back to your past? And then let's also ask ourselves this question. When you are sitting beside the television, watching with our family, have this imagination, and supposing what you used to do in the past is being shown on the TV, will you feel proud for that, or you'll regret it? Let's ask ourselves this question. I think it will really help us. So just to wrap up our conversation today, we've spoken a lot about youth development also, which comes with self-leadership, and also leadership in our institutions, which is the schools, tertiary institutions. And let's finally dwell on governance. Supposing someone has the desire to move into politics, or would like to become a president in future, a minister in future. I don't know if it's right, but I remember one time I had a conversation with you. You asked me so many questions, and I till now have not forgotten about those questions, and that has changed my mind. I would like to ask you, what are some of the things we should look for as young leaders in governance? What are the main factors we should consider in going in for leadership in government institutions?
You have asked quite a number of questions in one question. The question with regards to what, as young leaders, you should think about in terms of preparing to go into political leadership roles.
Yes.
You're also asking about what young people should do in taking up political leadership roles.
Yes.
I'll step back and start with asking the question, why do you want to go into those roles? What's your purpose for wanting to go into those roles? Our nation today needs leaders. And many times, the conversations we have in our various places, in our groups, in our small pockets, points consistently to failed political leadership. But the political leaders came from among us. And being leaders, we've got to listen to what language they're using. There are things I like to point out. If you're a young person, you're aspiring to political leadership, I'd say congratulations. In your aspiration to political leadership, be clear in your mind, what are you doing today that gives you a reason to go into political leadership? What is it that you want to do, or you aspire to do as a political leader? Could you start by driving that impact from today? Why do you want to go into political leadership? What do you want to achieve there? And when you come into political leadership, think about the point that our nation today is rich in so much and yet poor in so much? What do your citizens need? How do you intend to meet those needs? Beyond the talk, most of them promises that are very often not fulfilled. There's a great deal that in terms of political leadership we must think about. And so as a young person going to political leadership, at whatever level, aspire, list down 1, 2, or even 3 key things that in your term of office you want to bequeath to the next set of leaders. So from the first day you start planning to go into leadership, start thinking about legacy. Start thinking about what legacy do I want to leave behind, and how am I preparing myself for that leadership. A great deal of the time we prepare more for the event of taking up an office or a position than the actions and activities of leading in that office. And that's very important. We, from how it looks like, we have mastered and continue to find ways to master the whole process of election and electioneering. After the elections, then it looks like we almost have not prepared for life in that position as leaders. And so, how are you preparing yourself for that political office you want to take up? What experience are you building? What is that compelling vision you are painting for yourself and you want to paint for your following? What are the goals you want to achieve? And please, for the sake of the nation, don't let one of those goals, or don't let the overriding aspiration or reason for wanting to go into that political office be that you want to enrich yourself. So those are some things I'd like to say about that.
Thank you so much with your point on leadership in governance and let's say political leadership. In all our dealings in our lives, we aspire, we have bigger visions and plans. As youth, tell us why it's necessary to have Christ in our lives. If you want to become great leaders or become meaningful people in the future, I think this should be the final question today. And then afterwards, we end this with your top 3 keys for the youth.
Why should you have Christ in your life?
Yes, please.
It's a great question.
Yes, sir.
I am more than happy to answer that question by pointing out that first of all, the reason why you should have Christ in your life is that Christ offers us hope for today, strength for today, and what it takes to build a better tomorrow. What knowledge, wisdom, experience, leadership, power, money, wealth cannot do, Christ can do. You can have all the wealth, all the knowledge, but our world is more than just what we see with our physical eyes. As a young person, again, why should you have Christ in your life? Remember that we were created by God. We were created by God to be a reflection of God and the heart of God on earth. There's no way you can be a reflection of God on earth if you don't have Christ in you. And so, being a youth, we've got to think real hard. And today I speak not only to non-Christians, but also to Christians. And my offer to you is genuinely, I want you to answer for yourself the question, do you know Christ? Do you think you can be a true witness for Christ? And by the way, be aware that talking about witness, if you speak to the lawyers, you can only be a witness of what you are seen, heard, experienced. Typically, when you go into the courtroom and you are put in the stand as a witness, you are witnessing to what you have seen, heard, experienced. If you are in the stand and you witness to what another person has seen, my understanding is that it is struck out as hearsay because it's not something you witness. So if you're a Christian, are you a witness of Christ? And if your answer is yes, do you know him? Have you seen him? Have you experienced him? Until you know him, you have experienced him, you can talk about your personal experience of Christ. You would struggle to be a witness. And that's what the Holy Spirit does for us. The Holy Spirit empowers us such that in our experiencing of Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit, then we can be witnesses of the person we have experienced.
Can I chip in this question? I would like to ask, I learned for some time now in our current generation, there have been a lot of inspirations people are giving to the youth and believers in the Christendom to say we are the ones to pick up leadership roles. Can you give us a bit of your take on that? As in Christians going in for leadership roles, what are expected from them when they get to those roles? Because, for instance, if you should have a Christian, a strong believing Christian moving into a presidential position, we all know the tricks and some terms and bad terms, or I don't know what to put in those positions. Can you help out with some points to us in that regard?
I think that's pretty much a great deal of what we've been speaking about now.
Okay.
And before you even aspire to become a president, and you think that that's what would validate you as a leader, start from today. Start by leading yourself.
Okay.
Start by how you conduct yourself. Start by looking at how much are you influencing and impacting the people around you. How much are you making a difference in people's lives for good? So you start from there. Now, I am not too sure if it is the office of the president in and of itself that has the tricks you were talking about. It is people in the office that may have that tricks. It is the same. No, the office in itself is not set up as a bad thing. It's the same tricks and things we will point to if you are an MD. It's the same tricks we'll point to if you're an SRC president in a university today. It's the same tricks you can point to if you are the JCR president in the university today. It's the same tricks and stuff that we can point to if you are the class rep of year 1, level 100, level 400, level 200.
If I get the understanding, meaning our notion behind the presidency or being a leader in the political arena isn't like something which is automatically there.
What would that notion be?
That they are corrupt. You must have a kind of heart. You must go to certain places, gain power for leadership and all of that. Sometimes with some spiritual connotations. Are we the ones creating that there? And how can we change that mindset?
We must be cautious. I don't know about that as a mindset, but we must be cautious to generalize things that we are seeing and interpreting for ourselves.
Okay.
Take the spiritual bit. As a Christian, there's a spiritual bit to my life. The expectation as a Christian is that God speaks to me. Right?
Yes, sir.
When God speaks to me, God can speak to me about tomorrow. He can speak to me about next week. He can speak to me about the future.
Yes, yes.
Right? That's a spiritual connotation. If you think about somebody like Daniel, Daniel was a prime minister. In fact, the leaders he served were not just kings. They were kings over kings. So they had kingdoms under them, and they were the kings over those kingdoms. And Daniel was their right-hand man. Daniel transitioned more than one king. He transitioned Nebuchadnezzar, transitioned Belshazzar, Darius, right? What would you call Daniel? Daniel was the one who gave us one of the most powerful prophecies of our end time today. And yet, will you call him a politician? Will you call him a prime minister? Will you call him today's prophet? Yeah? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is for us to be mindful that the Constitution does not, in and of itself, have tricks. And by the question you asked, I get the sense that we're talking about negative connotations, because you also mentioned corruption. The Constitution in and of itself is not corrupt or is not glorifying corruption. In fact, there are a lot of things in the Constitution that stand against corruption. And I've heard somebody say that good people, right, or rather, and I hope I'm quoting right, a good law does not in and of itself make good people. There are people who execute the laws, there are people who implement the laws. Is it the law that's corrupt? If I choose to interpret the law in a manner that allows me to take advantage of a loophole, is it the law that is corrupt, or I'm the one who is creating the loophole? So we corrupt the rules that we carry. And I dare say that if you are not firm in self-leadership, and you don't fear God, and you have no plan to lead for good, when you get into a position of power, we would pretty soon realize that there are a lot of questions that you need to answer. It's very easy today to sit back and look at people in power and point to issues of corruption with them. But let's start with ourselves. Each of us, at whatever level we are, must look ourselves hard in the mirror and ask ourselves, the standards we are asking people to lead to, are we ourselves living up to those standards? Yeah? And so you asked me to also talk about my final thoughts to the youth.
Yes,
my
please.
final thoughts to the youth, the first one is that know Christ for yourself. Know him well enough and live for him. And be a genuine model and example of Christ wherever you be found. That's the first one. The second one, if you find yourself desiring for a position of power, a position of leadership, I would ask you to begin to reflect on what's your purpose, what's driving your reason to want to hold that position. Will that purpose, will that reason honor and glorify God? And the third and final thing I would say is that the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow. The youth are the leaders of today. And in that regard, don't see yourself wanting to be a leader tomorrow. Look at what are the questions of today that I can solve. What are the challenges and the problems I see today that I can solve? What answers do I have to the problems I see around me? And I want to conclude by saying that I am very confident, in spite of the things we see around today, that there is hope for this nation. We celebrated our 66th Independence Day at the beginning of this week. And people have asked the question, is there anything to celebrate? My answer is that I want to celebrate the future that God has for this nation. I am very confident that whatever it is we see today, we will transition them, and this nation would rise up to be what God has purposed and called us to be. And that call starts with me, and it starts with you. And together, if we are committed to being the kind of people that God will be proud of, we will change this nation. So don't give up on this nation. Let's work together. Let's build a nation that will be a pride of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Diaba. And I'm just short of words, and I wish we could never end this discussion, but definitely have to end. Let me give you the recap on the last three keys Mr. Diaba gave us. Know Christ for yourself. Secondly, reflect on what your purpose is. If you want to hold a position in leadership, reflect on what the purpose is. Then thirdly, the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow, but today. Let's hold the nation in our hands and change our narratives about the nation. And I like this exciting point, what he said about the Ghana gaining our 66th independence. He said, let's celebrate the future God has for the nation. As he said, people are asking, what are we to celebrate for this nation? I just like this. Let's celebrate about what the future God has for this nation. The future could be me, the future could be you. And I think Mr. Diaba has left the baton on us to continue this. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Diaba, for giving us this opportunity to have a time with you.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And we had a nice discussion with Mr. Christian Diaba. He works with one of the top financial institutions here in Ghana. And he's also a life coach and an executive coach performance. We thank you for joining us today. We'll come the same way next week. See you. Bye.